Something quiet has been happening beneath the surface of modern love, so normalized that men mistake it for virtue. A man meets a woman and believes that the noblest proof of his heart is limitlessness, endless patience, endless forgiveness, endless evadamity, endless availability, endless explanation. He confuses devotion with disillusion. He thinks that if he gives her everything, his time, his attention, his body, his plans, his future, then love will finally become safe. He does not realize that what he is constructing is not a relationship, but a shrine, and shrines are not where two equals meet. Shrines are where one person kneels. You can tell when a man's life has started to turn against him because his inner posture changes before anything visible changes. His shoulders tighten when the phone lights up. His breathing shortens when she takes too long to reply. His day becomes a corridor leading to a single door, her attention. He calls it romantic focus. It is actually psychological captivity. It often starts with a micro-dynamic so small, it looks like tenderness. He notices she is distant, and he leans in to show he cares. He sends the extra message. He asks the additional question. He offers extra reassurance. He rearranges his evening to be available just in case. He tells himself he is doing what good men do, being consistent, emotionally present, unwavering. But something else is happening underneath, something colder. He is training her nervous system to feel that his presence is guaranteed, his attention is automatic, his boundaries are negotiable, his standards are soft, and his life can be interrupted without cost. He does not see that he is making love cheaply. Men in general are not starving for sex, they are hungry for meaning, and when meaning is absent, a woman becomes the fastest substitute. She becomes the quickest injection of significance into a life that feels like paperwork, scrolling, and sleep. She becomes the illusion of direction. He thinks he is pursuing love. He is often pursuing relief. Then the pattern crystallizes in one specific man. He is diligent at work, polite in public, and competent enough to survive. Yet at night, he becomes a different creature, checking messages like a ritual, replaying conversations, drafting texts and deleting them, lifting his phone in the dark as if it were an oracle. He remembers her laugh like a hymn. He remembers her silence like a verdict. When she withdraws even slightly, he feels a private humiliation, not the humiliation of being disliked, but the humiliation of realizing how much power one person has over his mind. And then the lens tightens again. Because at some point, if you're honest, this is not merely a story about men out there. It is about you. The times you overgave and called it love. The times you tolerated disrespect and called it patience. The times you chased clarity from someone committed to ambiguity and called it communication. The times you offered your entire inner world to someone who had not yet earned the privilege to enter it. Plato understood this long before modern men gave the name unconditional love to something that often looks more like spiritual suicide. He understood that love is not automatically sacred. Love can be a ladder or a leash. Love can elevate the soul or enslave it. And the difference is not the woman. The difference is whether the man knows what love is for. By the end of this, you will understand why love without limits becomes a myth that destroys men quietly, and what it takes to love in a way that earns respect instead of begging for it. Plato lived in a city obsessed with appearance, persuasion, and appetite. Athens was a theater of intellect and ego, where men argued in public, desired in private, and called both freedom. He watched democracy intoxicate itself in speeches while the citizens' souls weakened. He watched men become brilliant at winning arguments and terrible at governing themselves. He watched the human mind become a courtroom where desire always found a justification. Plato's work is full of one recurring accusation. Most people live inside illusions and call them reality. They chase shadows and swear they are touching substances. They desire the image and forget the form. They worship the reflection and forget the source. He gives you a parable cold, surgical, prophetic about prisoners in a cave. They are chained, facing a wall. Behind them, a fire throws shadows of objects. The prisoners believe the shadows are real. They build their lives around them. They argue about them. They compete for status in a world made of projected silhouettes. Then one man is freed, dragged upward, blinded by the sun, and he sees the real world. And when he returns to the cave to tell the others, they resent him. Because illusions are comfortable, reality is costly. Modern love is full of caves. Men fall in love with a profile before they fall in love with a person, with a feeling about the future. with potential before character, with the sweetness of being wanted rather than the reality of being valued. They confuse intensity for intimacy, chemistry for compatibility, and longing for meaning. And when they are willing to give without limit, they believe they are being noble. Plato would say they are being uneducated in the highest sense. They do not know what they are loving. Here is the brutal thesis that must become the spine of everything that follows. Love without limits is not higher. Love, it is an undisciplined desire wearing a holy mask, and it turns a man into a servant of the very thing he calls devotion. Plato's framework gives you a way to see why this happens. He distinguishes between what merely appears good and what is truly good. He distinguishes between appetites that pull you downward and erodes that can pull you upward. In the Symposium, love is not just romance, it is a force. Eros is the engine that moves the human being toward what he believes will complete him. But Eros is dangerous because it can attach to the wrong object. It can be educated, elevated, purified, or it can remain infantile, fixated, hungry, and blind. If a man does not educate his Eros, he will worship the nearest beautiful thing and call it destiny. Plato's famous ladder of love is not a poetic decoration, it is a moral demand. It begins with attraction to one beautiful body. Then it ascends toward appreciation of beauty in all bodies, then toward beauty in souls, character, courage, intelligence, virtue, then toward beauty in laws and institutions, order, justice, structure, then toward beauty in knowledge and truth, and finally toward beauty itself, the form of beauty, something higher than any single person, something that does not age, does not betray, does not vanish when a mood changes. Most men never climb, they camp at the first rung and call it love. Now translate this into modern dynamics without hiding behind academic language. A man meets a woman. He feels the surge, the intoxicating signal that his life could become warmer, richer, more alive. He thinks the feeling is proof of a cosmic match. But Plato would ask him, what exactly are you loving? Are you loving her soul, her character, her virtues, her choices? Or are you loving the shadow her presence casts on the wall of your loneliness? When a man believes in love without limits, he treats Eros like a king that must be obeyed. He gives more than is wise. He forgives more than is just. He stays longer than is dignified. He believes that the more he sacrifices, the more real love becomes. But sacrifice without discernment is not virtue. It is blindness. It is a cave. Plato would say that a soul without philosophy, without discipline, without reason trained to rule becomes a democracy of impulses. Appetite votes, fear votes, pride votes, lust votes, insecurity votes, and the loudest impulse wins. The man calls it following his heart. Plato would call it inner anarchy. This is why love without limits collapses respect, because respect is the recognition of order. Respect is the sense that a man is governed by something higher than the moment. The feminine instinct, when healthy, does not seek a man who worships her. It seeks a man who can love without losing his axis in life. A man who can desire a woman deeply without making her the sun around which everything else must orbit. Consider modern scenarios that prove this thesis. A man starts dating and believes limitless availability is intimacy. He responds instantly. He cancels plans. He becomes permanently reachable. He thinks he is showing commitment. But what he is really showing is that his attention has no higher assignment. He offers his time like loose change, and in the attention economy, loose change is not respected. Another man enters a relationship and believes limitless tolerance is love. When she disrespects him, he reframes it as stress. When she crosses a boundary, he calls it a misunderstanding. When she withdraws affection, he calls it needing space, then panics and tries to earn it back with gifts, apologies, and overfunctioning. He is trying to keep the illusion alive that love can be maintained by giving more, but in reality, he is teaching the relationship that his boundaries are theater, and when boundaries are threatened, respect dies. A third man experiences rejection and swings to the opposite extreme. He decides that limits mean coldness. He becomes rigid, suspicious, and withholding. He refuses tenderness. He refuses vulnerability. He becomes a man who can control his behavior but cannot love. Plato would not praise this as wisdom. It is still slavery to fear. It is still life in the cave, just with different shadows. Plato's point is not that love should be small. His point is that love must be ordered, love must be aimed, love must serve the good, otherwise it becomes idolatry. He gives you the line, almost cruel in its simplicity, the lover is a kind of servant to the beloved. And that is precisely why the uneducated lover becomes ridiculous, because he turns his own soul into a tool for someone else's mood. He abandons the higher part of himself, the part Plato calls reason, the part meant to rule, and then he wonders why his life feels smaller. Now we go into the psychological mechanism, the autopsy of how the myth destroys a man in phases. What the man thinks is happening, he believes he is proving loyalty, he believes he is showing up, he believes consistency will create security, he believes that if he is patient enough, loving enough, understanding enough, then love will stabilize. He considers his limitless giving to be a shield against abandonment. What is really happening, he is confusing love with purchase. He is trying to buy certainty with sacrifice. He is trying to purchase peace with self-erasure. And the more he gives without discernment, the more he signals that his self-respect is negotiable. At first, it looks harmless. He feels numb around the imbalance because denial soothes. He tells himself, this is normal. He tells himself, modern people are busy. He describes himself as overthinking. He ignores the tightness in his chest when she cancels plans without accountability. He ignores the subtle way she takes him for granted. He ignores the fact that his joy depends on her messages. He does not call it dependence. He calls it love. He begins to adjust his life in small increments. He stays up later because she texts at night. He wakes earlier to send a good morning message. He checks her social media to feel close when she is distant. His attention becomes a pipeline feeding her presence into his mind. He is not learning from her. He is consuming her. And consumption is not intimacy. Then justification arrives. He starts negotiating with reality. She did not mean it. She has trauma. She is just testing me. I should be more understanding. If I set a boundary, she will think I am controlling. Notice how the man's moral language becomes a tool to avoid discomfort. He uses virtue talk to excuse cowardice. He calls it compassion. But Plato would ask, compassion for whom? Compassion that destroys you is not compassion. It is self-deception. Now the self-negotiation becomes physical. He skips the gym to be available. He postpones work to reply. He stops seeing friends because it causes friction. He starts hiding parts of his life to keep her calm. He begins to sculpt himself into an acceptable shape. The more he sculpts, the less real he becomes, and the less real he becomes, the less respect he commands. Then the final phase, self-abandonment, the kneeling that happens inside the mind before it happens in any visible way. He overtexts. Not because he has something meaningful to say, but because silence terrifies him. He waits for replies with the posture of a beggar. He avoids conflict, not because he is mature, but because he is afraid. He apologizes for things he does not believe he did. He explains his intentions like a defendant in court. He offers to change his preferences. He becomes easygoing in ways that are, in fact, a surrender. He is no longer related to a woman. He is related to an altar. I work with men who reach this point and think the solution is to be more loving. They double down on the very poison that is killing them. I once spoke to a man who told me, quietly, that he felt like a ghost in his own life. He said he could not focus at work because he was always waiting for her mood to stabilize. He could not enjoy hobbies because he felt guilty enjoying anything without her. His nervous system had turned the relationship into a surveillance state. Every hour, he needed a sign. He said, if I could just get back to how it was in the beginning, everything would be fine. That sentence is the cave. He was chasing a shadow on the wall. Plato would say the beginning often feels divine because projection is strongest there. You are not seeing the person, you are seeing the promise. The promise that your loneliness might end. The promise that your life might become coherent. The promise that you might finally be chosen. But promises are not character. And then the contrasting story that reveals the machinery. The man she later pursued looked similar on the surface. He did not look like a mythical alpha. He did not need dramatic dominance. The difference was that he had limits without resentment. His affection was warm but not compulsive. His time was given but not surrendered. When she tested, he did not flinch. When she withdrew, he did not chase. He did not punish me. He returned to his life. His presence felt like a choice, not a plea. And because it was a choice, it had weight. This is the paradox modern men must learn. Unlimited love feels virtuous to the giver, but it feels cheap to the receiver. Not because the receiver is evil, because the psyche values what requires discernment. When everything is given automatically, nothing is valued deeply. Now widen the lens again, because the myth is not only personal, it is cultural propaganda disguised as romance. The modern world sells limitless love as the highest good, because it sells well. Songs, films, social media captions, endless slogans about love with no expectations, love unconditionally. If you love me, you will accept everything. But there is a hidden trick. In most of these stories, the lover is not asked to be wise. He is asked to be useful. He is asked to tolerate chaos. He is asked to remain. And the person who benefits from limitless love is often the one least accountable. Dating apps amplify this by turning access into abundance. A woman can receive attention from hundreds of men in a day. A man can be ignored for months. This imbalance trains men into extremes, either desperate overgiving when they get a chance, or bitter withdrawal. And both extremes make men less capable of real love. Desperation turns love into purchase. Bitterness turns love into war. Social media adds another layer, public performance. Relationships become content. Arguments become posts. Breakups become branding. In such an environment, limits look like cruelty because they interrupt a fantasy. If you say no, you are labeled. If you withdraw, you are accused of being avoidant. If you set standards, you are told you are insecure. The culture often punishes men for setting boundaries while demanding that they be accountable. It is incoherent, and incoherence pushes weak men into appeasement. Then there is the risk landscape. Public shaming, HR consequences, false accusation risk, legal costs of marriage and divorce, and custody battles. The rational man sees these risks and becomes cautious. But caution without philosophy becomes cynicism. And cynicism is another cave. It is the shadow of wisdom, the counterfeit of discernment. Plato's diagnosis would be severe. A society that cannot distinguish between love and appetite will produce citizens who cannot govern themselves. They will chase pleasure and call it freedom. They will chase validation and call it self-worth. They will chase romantic intoxication and call it meaning. And when they crash, they will blame women, blame culture, blame luck, anything except their own untrained Eros. Here is the cost of staying blind. Loss of mission, erosion of self-respect, hollow relationships where you are present but not sovereign. Paranoia that makes you interpret every delay as betrayal. Numbness that makes you settle for affection you do not respect. Men are becoming strangers in their own lives, living as employees of someone else's mood. And here are lines that can cut through years of confusion. Unlimited love is not noble if it requires you to abandon your dignity. If you cannot say no, your yes is not devotion, it is compliance. The woman is not the center of your universe. She is a guest in a universe you are responsible for building. If you must lose yourself to keep love, what you are keeping is not love. Now the practical integration, the translation of Plato into behavior that does not sound like cheap advice but like initiation. Notice emotional kneeling. It is the invisible act of lowering your standards to keep proximity. Most men do it quietly. They reply too fast. They over-justify. They apologize for the sake of peace. They tolerate disrespect to avoid loss. They act as if being chosen is more important than being aligned with themselves. Refuse it. Let discomfort exist. Let silence exist. Let the possibility of losing her exist without begging the universe to change. Plato would say that the soul becomes strong by turning toward truth, not toward comfort. Truth sometimes costs you people. Pay the cost. Notice the addiction to reassurance. Most men ask for it directly or indirectly. Are we okay? Do you still like me? What are we? They think they are communicating. They are actually confessing dependence. Begin to move as if your stability is not rented from someone else. If you need clarity, ask once, calmly, then observe actions. Do not interrogate, do not plead, do not perform analysis like a lawyer. Speak like a man who can accept reality. Notice the myth of unconditional tolerance. Most men fear being labeled controlling, so they let boundaries collapse. They allow things that corrode respect, flakiness, disrespect, manipulation, and constant emotional chaos. Then they tell themselves they are being loving. Stop pretending that love means accepting everything. Love in Plato's sense is devotion to the good. If something is not good, if it erodes your soul loving, it is not virtue, it is madness. Notice the collapse of the mission. Most men make a woman the sun, and their purpose the moon. They stop building, they start orbiting, they become available at the expense of their future. Reverse it. Protect your work, protect your training, protect your sleep, protect your friendships, not as a performance but as an architecture. When a woman enters your life, she should join a structure. If she demands that you dismantle the structure to prove love, she is asking you to worship her. Do not comply, not with anger, with calm refusal. Notice performative detachment. Some men, after being hurt, decide the solution is to become cold. They create limits, but the limits are not rooted in self-respect. They are rooted in resentment. They punish, they test, they play games. Plato would call this another kind of cave. It is still life in the shadows. Instead, set limits cleanly. Be warm when warmth is deserved. Be distant when distance is necessary. Do not weaponize your attention. Govern it. Allow her to react while you remain measured. This is where men fail. They set a boundary, then panic at her displeasure, then retract it. They cannot tolerate the tension of being misunderstood. But a man who cannot tolerate tension cannot lead himself. Hold your line. If she respects it, you have found a woman capable of higher love. If she resents it, you have found the truth. Either way, you win in reality. Plato calls this a turning the soul away from the shadows and toward the light. The light is not always pleasant. The light exposes. The light reveals what was false, but only the light allows you to build something real. Now two paths open, and men are already walking both around you. If you ignore this, you will continue to worship love as limitlessness, and you will slowly become spiritually bankrupt. You will keep mistaking desire for destiny. You will keep giving beyond wisdom and calling it devotion. You will build relationships where your value is measured by your willingness to tolerate. You will become the man who is loved for utility and discarded when inconvenient. You will grow older and more resentful. You will tell yourself you are unlucky. You will numb yourself with distractions. You will see women as threats or puzzles. You will lose the ability to love keenly because your heart will associate love with humiliation. In 5 to 10 years, you will have a smaller life, fewer ambitions, less discipline, more bitterness, more fatigue. You will look stable on the outside and feel hollow on the inside. If you answer this as initiation, you will rebuild your relationship with Eros. You will stop treating women as saviors and start treating them as companions you choose. You will develop limits that are not walls, but gates, warm, firm, selective. You will love with discernment. You will protect your mission, and your mission will defend you from romantic idolatry. You will be less available to chaos, which means you will be more available to peace. You will experience loneliness at first, because you will no longer use romance as sedation, but that loneliness will forge you. In 5 to 10 years, your life will be quieter, more ordered, more purposeful. You will have fewer relationships, but they will be truer. Your body will carry less anxiety. Your mind will be clearer. Women will sense a different kind of man, not a man begging to be chosen, not a man punishing the world, but a man oriented towards something higher. And that orientation will generate respect because it is rare. Now the final warning has been spoken. Love without limits is a myth, because real love is not limitless attachment. Real love is ordered devotion to what is good. When you remove limits, you do not create purity. You create chaos. You create a relationship where appetite rules and dignity collapses. You make a shrine where one person kneels, and shrines do not produce mutual respect. And here is the mirror line that returns responsibility to where it belongs. She does not steal your soul. She merely reveals whether you handed it away. If this struck a chord with you, do not let it become just another piece of content you consume and forget. Share it with a man who is calling self-erasure unconditional love. Subscribe and keep this work alive for the men who are still trapped in the cave and do not yet know why the shadows keep breaking their hearts. Love becomes sacred the moment it stops being worship and becomes wisdom.